Please go ahead, hang on, introduce yourselves to us.
Good morning, judges. My name is Brittany Blair. We're from Reno, Nevada, from Reno High School. And next year I'll be going to the University of Nevada.
I'm William Pez, and I will be going to the University of Nevada, Reno also.
Hi, I'm Ian Massey, and I will be going to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo.
Hi, I'm Juliana Gordon. I will also be attending Cal Poly San Luis Obispo in the fall. Our teacher is Mr. Richard Clark, and our unit coach is Mr. Matthew Oakes. And thank you so much for being here today.
What a privilege. Thank you for all the hard work you did to get here. That's outstanding. Judge Stevens, you want to?
Sure. My name is Candida Steele, and I'm a judge on the U.S. Civilian Board of Contract Appeals. I have federal government contract jurisdiction around the country.
Read.
My name is Reed Lee. I practice law in Chicago. I do constitutional law, primarily free speech and related things.
My name is Mike Miles. I'm the treasurer of Jefferson County, which is Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm pleased to say that I've lost a lot of money in your town over the years.
Thank you.
Glad to stimulate the local education system anyway. Certainly a great privilege to be involved in doing that. It certainly was. We are going to do question number 1 with you this morning, which is one we've been having fun with, and I hope that you will have fun with us. I know that you know the question by heart, but so your family and friends can know the treacherous road you're going to take us down. I'll read it real quickly, and then we'll follow along with you. No president ever confronted such political catastrophe as Lincoln faced when he took the oath of office on March 4, 1861. That is a quote. Do you agree or disagree with the recent assessment by the 2 American historians? Why or why not? What evidence can you offer to support your response? Why did the prospect of adding new states to the Union intensify the conflict? Chief Justice Toney hoped that the majority opinion in Dred Scott would peacefully resolve the conflict over slavery. Why did it fail to do so? You've done all the hard work to get here. Let's have some fun. You may begin.
In his first inaugural address, President Lincoln stated, "I therefore consider that in view of the Constitution and its law, the Union is unbroken, and to the extent of my ability, I shall take care, as the Constitution itself expressly adjoins upon me, that the laws of the Union be faithfully executed in all the states." President Lincoln entered the presidency with a crumbling Union. The South turned against the North on the basis of states' rights and slavery. Before President Lincoln was even sworn in as president, 7 Southern states had seceded and elected Jefferson Davis as their president.
We agree with scholars Neil McNeil and Richard Baker that no president ever faced such political catastrophe as President Lincoln, because no president previously dealt with such a divided union. Tension between North and South was originally seen through the 3/5 Clause in Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, and the Fugitive Slave Clause in Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3. Furthermore, in 1787, the Northwest Ordinance chartered a government from the Northwest Territory, outlawing slavery in those territories forever.
The division between the North and the South also occurred over the issue of states' rights, with the nullification crisis of 1832, when South Carolina passed the Ordinance of Nullification to declare the federal tariffs of 1828 and 1832 unconstitutional because they harmed Southern cotton growers. The political atmosphere prevented unification between Republicans and Democrats to the point where South Carolina felt the need to secede rather than wait for another election cycle, as was the case in the Revolution of 1800, in which the Democratic Republicans overtook the Federalists.
Conflicts further intensified over the issue of free and slave territory with the Gadsden Purchase of 1853, because all new added territory became free of slavery. Furthermore, Missouri Compromise of 1820 was overturned in 1854 with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which deemed that it was unconstitutional to limit slavery in territories on the basis of popular sovereignty. On August 27, 1858, during the Lincoln-Douglas debate, Stephen Douglas formulated the Freeport Doctrine,
in which he argued that despite the court's rulings, slavery could be prevented from any territory by the refusal of the people living in that territory to pass laws favorable to slavery. However, popular sovereignty was violated when Kansas was overrun with pro-slavery forces, creating Bleeding Kansas, thereby splitting the North and the South further on ideological lines.
In order to lay to rest both Northern and Southern fears, Chief Justice Robert Taney, using Article 3 and Article 4, hoped that the ruling in Dred Scott v. Sanford, asserting that Americans were not citizens and therefore did not have the same protection of rights. President at the time, James Buchanan, wrote to U.S. Supreme Court Associate John Catron, hoping that the decision would quell unrest before its inauguration. However, Chief Justice Robert Taney did not hope to peacefully resolve the issue over slavery. He was a prominent slave owner and hoped to protect the South from Northern aggression.
Ronnie had hoped that he would push the issue of slavery out of the political sphere, and that his decision would settle that slavery could expand west, and therefore give the South the push it needed to compete with the North in wealth as well as political power. This failed because, as Frederick Douglass had hoped, it brought the issue of slavery to the nation's attention.
The decision not only used the Fifth Amendment to declare the compromise that was holding the Union together unconstitutional, but also created national disorder with the disallowance of popular sovereignty. Republicans declared a slave power conspiracy had infiltrated the government, which furthered the conflict between Northern Republicans and Southern Democrats. Publisher Horace Greeley of the New York Tribune wrote in 1854, "We are not one people, we are two people. We are a people for freedom and a people for slavery. Between the two, conflict is inevitable. This is the catastrophe President Lincoln had faced."
To move on a little bit, that was a very nice presentation, thank you. To move on a little bit, why did Lincoln deny the constitutional right of any state to secede from the Union?
First of all, in Article 4, Section 3, it says that any new state cannot be created out of the territory of the previous state. And so having anyone secede, or even West Virginia coming back into the Union, he said that wasn't right for that to happen anymore. He had to hold the Union together.
Our constitutional lawyer over here has written down 14 questions I think he'd like to ask you, and I'd like to take them.
Well, I guess, I mean, you seem to have an understanding of Dred Scott, and so let's talk about that for a minute. Where would, if the Civil War hadn't intervened and brought us the 13th Amendment, and if Roger Brooks Conner hadn't died, where was he going to stop? Was he ultimately going to say that people holding slaves in a southern state under state law could take their slaves and keep them even in a free state?
I think that either way, what Justice Roger Taney would have said would not have been as powerful as Abraham Lincoln's word. Abraham Lincoln and Roger Taney did not like each other. That even if Roger Taney did not want Abraham Lincoln to suspend the writ of habeas corpus, Abraham Lincoln did it anyway. There was no push that Roger Taney really had in the states.
I'd say that Roger Taney would look at slaves as a natural right for your property. So he'd say that you can take this property anywhere in the States just as you can take any of your other property. And so this is with this decision that black people were property, and that they were not citizens.
And to quickly add on to that, with the decision that Dred Scott, he also affirmed that with the slaves were property, it essentially violated the popular sovereignty of states, because if they were property, even though there's a slave state, since it's their property, if they bring it in, they have the right to own their own property. And so it essentially violated the idea of popular sovereignty.
To say that no president ever confronted such a catastrophe as anyone else, you have to compare it to President Roosevelt and others. I don't mean to take one away from you. If you want to take that, you can. What comparisons did you draw to others? Say some more about that, to other presidents' catastrophes to decide that this was the greatest one. Did you compare it to others?
I draw a comparison to Harry Truman when he had to face the Cold War and the threat of nuclear war on an international scale. I'd say that he actually faced a greater political struggle than Abraham Lincoln did, being as the conflict was on a global scale.
You did steal mine, actually. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was one of my...
I could read your mind.
connected, was one of my top choices. Facing a country that was completely broken in depression is a very, very hard catastrophe to face, especially with his New Deal that he had to just step in as a powerhouse. But to me, Abraham Lincoln, the Union was completely broken, that even though Franklin Delano Roosevelt's country was broken in depression, Abraham Lincoln was broken in actual states, that his country, only 40% supported Abraham Lincoln. No one else in the South did.
And I would draw back to more colonial George Washington. When he was the first president of the United States, he had to face a world waiting for the country to just fail on its own. And he had to put down domestic ideas such as the whiskey rebellion, with the rising of old farmers and people that wanted to make whiskey out of their crops. But then compared to Lincoln's complete split of a nation, and the fact that the steps that Lincoln had to take were far more severe and far more necessary than the ones that George Washington had to take.
I compared it to President Wilson and the 14 amendments that Senator Lodge proposed for the ratification of the Treaty of Versailles. Because of that divide between the people, coming out of World War I, you didn't see a lot of that healing that needed to happen, and so you did face a lot of that political divide in Congress, so you weren't really able to come out of World War II together as a nation.
What basic arguments did the southern states, or the states that seceded, use to justify their action?
You can look back to the Declaration of Independence, saying that we the people, when they created that social contract with the government, with the consent of the governed, when they felt that the government on the national level wasn't really representing their interests and were almost purposely trying to tax them from the southern perspective, that they were being unfairly taxed, and almost pointed out that they felt that they had the right to form a government that more fairly and more accurately represented their views.
And were they right about that? Right in the analogy to 1776? Or are there differences?
There are differences because, as it's said in the Declaration of Independence, it's not for light or transient causes, and just this tax on the product coming out of there, I think Jefferson would have considered light and transient cause.
Yeah, you talked about the Freeport Doctrine. Would that have worked, or would Southerners have insisted that the federal government provide sufficient protection for the institution of slavery in the territory?
Especially after the Dred Scott decision, a lot of Southerners actually felt they no longer had to secede from the Union, especially in the Mercury of South Carolina. Newspapers said that this was a reason that they could still stay in the Union. They wouldn't have pushed it because they already saw the federal government protecting slavery to a large degree.
Yeah, and so why, in the period of 3.5 years, why is it the South that's leaving? They won Dred Scott. They seem to win it all. What happened?
Well, the North also felt that the Dred Scott was very against their own rights. President Lincoln also said that looking at promoting slavery, you're actually going to see it throughout all of the states. It wasn't just for the southern states. And so you saw the North having more of that divide.
Really great job. You want me to start? Okay. I thought that was a lovely job. Thank you very much. And each time you spoke, you added another layer of, I mean, obviously, if we had another hour to talk with you, you would have a whole many more layers that we don't even know about yet. So that was just a really lovely job. I was particularly impressed with the examples that you brought up in the question. I mean, your presentation was excellent, but it was just really nice to see what examples you used in your answering your questions. And Truman, I thought, was very interesting. Your at the very end, your South Carolina newspaper. I mean, that's a really nice little gem to bring in. I'm really pleased to hear such good minds working on our behalf, and I hope that you'll find your way into the state or federal government so that we don't end up having another civil war down the road. We do have some very serious disagreements amongst ourselves, and we need your help to make sure it doesn't happen again. So thank you. You did a really lovely job, and I hope that you're inspired as a result of this course and your experiences to participate and make sure that our country ends up the way it should and protects us all. Thank you.
He wants to leave you here for an hour or two, and then you'd like to spend some more time.
Yes, it would have been, we could have had a productive conversation for an hour on this. I very much liked, I thought your presentation was very well crafted, particularly the end I thought was a very superb turn. So I compliment you on that. The history of this period, I mean, when some of you may go on to study it in some detail, and you may be left just shaking your head. And when you really study the details of Dred Scott, I mean, there's some technical legal ways where it's even worse than it seems. But you know, it's good to expose yourselves to this kind of issue early in your encounter with the Constitution. Jefferson wrote of the Missouri Compromise in a letter that, you know, the issue was a fire bell in the night. It gave him night terrors. It was going to doom this union. He couldn't see a way out. Do we face issues like that? You know, that maybe they're not that insurmountable, but I think we have some difficult problems. And looking at the past, at how people failed to solve them, may help us have some better ideas on how to address the ones we face. So I invite you to that challenge. I invite you to that lifelong encounter, and you've made great stuff.
I agree. You have a diverse panel of judges with you this morning. You have a federal judge who writes opinions for a living. You have an appellate attorney who writes federal and state appeals cases, and you have a political campaign worker for a long time who would write the speeches for his candidates. It is fun for each of the three of us to listen to something that is well written. And what you gave us for 4 minutes this morning, I thought was beautifully written, and that doesn't just happen in a couple of days. It takes time and editing and whittling down the timing, and you nailed it, and it was beautifully written, and I enjoyed it. I loved your comparisons. I thought that each of the four of you had a different comparison to Lincoln's catastrophe. You weren't saying it was greater necessarily, but you were saying that they were legitimate catastrophes and backed them up, and that's the best answer I'll hear to that today. I suspect it's early in the day, and I bet you that's the best answer I hear to that question today. There were two more things I'd say very quickly. One of them is there were 3 or 4 different directions we could have gone with you in questioning, boring in on Dred Scott, talking about property rights, doing the comparison. And we usually, during the course of the day, pick 1 or 2 of those and try to, you helped us do all 4 of them. We took all 4 directions we had set aside in our meeting this morning of ways that we could go, and you gave them all, you gave us doors to go through on all of them, and we really appreciated that. Last thing I said was I enjoyed the Greeley quote. That was a great quote to use. That's a great quote to use in that situation. He also said, "Go west, young man, go west." And you made the 3 of us more interested in doing that because of your great job.
Thank you.